All right, welcome everybody to the first ever edition, and this is a big one for our very first one. This is a big get. I thought I was gonna get somebody small, but I actually got somebody big, not only in name but in stature. We got Big Herc 916. That's where you can follow him on Instagram. Happy to have you, man. How you doing today?
Oh man, I appreciate the opportunity. Great day. It's hot as hell out here in Arizona, but AC'd up and pooled up, so it's all good.
I'm surprised you didn't do it in the pool like you did. Do the interview from the pool like you did the other day on your
Oh,
channel.
I know. Yeah, I got to set that up. It's just sometimes in a day, man, it's cool to be up in the shade in the house.
I got you. Yeah, this Texas heat is no joke either. So I had a buddy. You're in Arizona, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a buddy. He just moved back to Texas. He was in Chandler. So
Yeah,
Chandler.
yeah, that's right by me. I'm in Gilbert.
Okay. Oh, Gilbert. Yeah, that's yeah.
Yeah,
We partied out there a little bit. So I
yeah,
like the
yeah.
little
Nice area.
downtown area. It's a cool
Yep,
little vibe. So
yep.
not bad. But the first thing I want you to do is kind of introduce who you are, what you do, some of the projects you're working on. I found you on YouTube.
Okay.
So kind of talk about your channels and kind of what your mission is and what your goals are and what you're doing.
So Big Herc 916, originally from Sacramento, and I got into social media to kind of influence young men that look like me and that don't look like me to kind of pursue their passions, enlighten them on some of the things that are narratives of society that aren't necessarily what they appear to be. And one of the biggest ones is the whole prison, street life culture, and that's where I kind of really put my foundation down with Fresh Out, which I started over a decade ago. And having done almost a decade of my life in prison, I want to give back. I made a lot of mistakes, owned up to a lot of my mistakes as far as accountability. Don't make no excuses. But I want to be able to share my stories and other people's stories because I know a lot of young men don't have mentors, they don't have males in their life, and so it's hard when you're looking for somebody for guidance or insight. So that channel there was one of the foundational channels I started, and then I started Big Herc 916, Positivity and Motivation, where I talk about a little bit of everything, but I also that channel is more or less about your passions, your choices, and just going after your dreams. A lot of people they fall short because they give up, they lose hope, or they feel that there's not an opportunity out there. And one thing I realize is that you got to create opportunity. And, sometimes that journey might be a lonely journey. You might have a lot of people that discredit you or count you out. But at the end of the day, it's all about what you want to create with your own reality. And that's what I figured out throughout the years of doing social media, doing time in prison, making friends with a lot of people, and just navigating in a bunch of different worlds.
Okay, all right. Well, you kind of summarized what I want this interview to be about. You said something about taking your opportunities, and it might be a moment in time where you have to figure out, that this is what I have to do at this time. I have to make a choice, and that's where your moment is now. That's where that's the genesis of it for me too. Because I work with athletes, and whenever you work with athletes, you get a lot more of you get a lot of the single parent homes. You get a lot of the kids that don't have money to pay for things. They don't have food to keep them nourished, to keep them up there to working out and all that kind of stuff. So they need guidance, and I appreciate you for that and doing that with your channel. But the whole point of this is I have a little saying I say, behind every success story is a journey. And I would qualify you as a success. From what I know of you, you picked yourself up and you made something of yourself when times could have been real hard. But every journey starts with a moment. So I want to go over I want to start off talking about your moments that defined you. Because every time you have a moment, you have a chance to do something. You can either go left and do it the wrong way or go right. So let's start off with the prison talk. Take me back to who you were before you went to prison, as a child, all the way up to that point. How would you describe yourself?
As a child, I was a very creative kid. I have art on my wall behind me. I used to draw a lot as a kid. That was one of my passions: drawing, painting, um, coming up with my own comic books. I was one of those kids that would look in the Sunday paper, and I don't know if you remember, they used to have that picture: if you can draw this, you could be an artist. And it was this little cartoon character, and I would try to draw it and say, let me send it in. Maybe I can get a job being an artist. I was a kid that looked at video games back then. We didn't have what is it, PlayStation
PlayStation,
2.
yes. Mhm.
We had like in television. So I would look at in television and the Coleco and all these games, and I would try to come up with my own video game and I would send them letters telling them that, hey, maybe I can design a game for you. So I was a kid who was very entrepreneurial. I always had a lot of drive. I would watch Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. I'd be like, man, I would look in GQ magazine, and I wanted to always be different. I felt like I never really fit in, but I was always trying to find my path. Straight A student, did really good in school, read a lot of books, never got in any trouble. I was kind of nerdy, skateboarded, was into skateboarding, BMXing, all that fun stuff, and I had a lot of great ideas, but a lot of times those ideas were bigger than the people I were around. So they didn't know how to cultivate them. Had I had the right people around me cultivating my ideas, whether it was designing video games, designing shoes, or whatever, my life would have been different. But because of my curiosity and my drive and my wanting to be different, that got me involved in being attracted to guys in the streets that I seen making money, their persona, what I thought was cool, trying to find my own identity. And that's how I got caught up, man. I mean, if you know, I think if I would have never, we moved from a military base when I was in seventh going into the eighth grade. If I would have never left that military base and maybe have moved into a different environment and not been exposed to a certain element, my life would have been totally different. But it was, and I kind of got caught up in that allure of that street life. Even though I never smoked weed, never was into drinking 40s and stuff, I was into working out. I was always different, and even when I was doing that, I knew it was wrong, and so I was sneaking around and stuff. But it was a lot of duality in there, man. And I feel like at the age around, I think I was like probably 12, 13, 14.
Very
It was so
impressionable
important.
age.
Yeah, very impressionable, man. And I think, I had a grandfather, didn't have a dad, but if I would have had the right male, the right social influence, that's so important. I look back now at just the choices I made. If I would have stuck with skateboarding, if I would have went to art school, a lot of different things. But that was one of those moments, man. Getting caught up, being exposed to juvenile hall, doing time for selling crack, and then coming out and having a certain element to me now because I've having experienced that life, and now certain things now didn't scare me or wasn't really intimidating, and it just kind of going on that path making bad choices. So that was the first time I got in trouble, and I was still a lost kid, and from there I moved and was able to go to another environment that was a total antithesis of where I was at, which was going from Sacramento to Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach, by default, because my mom got married, we were able to live in a neighborhood that was very nice, no crime. You had the beach, you had surfing, you had UGG boots, you had all this stuff. But I felt like an outsider. I didn't know how to fit into that culture. I was a kid trying to be in, and so even when I tried to fit in, the coaches and the sports teams kind of made it feel like, there's only probably maybe four black kids in the whole school, three black kids, and I'm the darkest kid, and I'm kind of like, I felt like one of the more dominant because all these kids, they these are straight squares, super squares. So I didn't understand it, and living there, it did give me an opportunity to see a different side of society. People who had wine cellars, boats in their backyard, people who are really living a different kind of American dream. But when I graduated, I ended up going back to Sacramento, and that got me caught up again. And so it was a cycle. And going back to the people I knew prior to moving that weren't really doing anything, that was still street orientated. I made some bad choices, but all that to say is that what you're around, the people you socialize with, you can't mix and match. You can't mix a pigeon with an eagle. It doesn't work. Eagles fly with eagles, pigeons fly with pigeons. If you're a dreamer, you're a person who wants to succeed at a certain level, you have to separate yourself, man.
You know,
And
show me your friends. I'll show you your future.
man, that's it right there. And I didn't realize how important that was. And I learned the hard way. It wasn't until I got to federal prison and I really looked around, and you're around mafia guys, you're around cartel guys, you're around all these super gangsters, and you listen to conversations and what kind of money people are making, and then what kind of time people are doing. It just puts everything in perspective. So it's so important, man, that you really pay attention to the company you keep.
Yeah, of course, your surroundings are everything. You know what I mean? So either you can be in a place where, you're ready to thrive because you got people that are like-minded, people that are driven, or you get people that are jealous of you and they bring you down. So they want to bring you down to their level. Not everybody wants to see you succeed. So that's a good
That's
little
right.
piece of nugget of information. But all right, so let's talk. I got four moments sitting here that I feel like, and if I'm wrong, just let me know. Change it up a little bit, but four pivotal moments that could have been decisions that you could have made to go one way or the other. So let's talk about going to prison for the majority of the time, the for the bank robbery. You had a decision that day, and I've heard you talk about it, but I'm gonna let you tell the story because you know it better than I. You did it, but tell me what was going through your mind. You had the choice to do it, the choice not to do it. What made you click to say, I'm going to do this today?
Man, that day right there, I don't know what was going through my vessel, my spirit, as far as why I even entertained that. I mean, I knew these guys that weren't people I should have been entertaining with this type of bullshit anyways, but that morning I had went out and walked my dogs and kind of looked up and down my street. I had a weird vibe. And my mom even called me that morning and asked me what I was doing, and that was a sign. That's when you get those gut instincts, like those that tingling sensation, and there's something just don't add up. I had one of those moments, man. But for whatever reason, I overlooked it. I don't know. That's what happens when you compound bad choices, or just like I guess um negative energy to a degree, and you entertain it to where and when something tries to deter you or save you, you're not able to really you're not able to actually decipher what it is, because you're so clouded with just this negative energy. And I think, like, I mean, my vibration, and for what I was tuned in, I felt, I don't know, man. Because I can't even explain the mindset. And looking back now, all I had to do was just not answer the phone, or just say, I'm cool, and let those guys go about their way. And I don't know if it was just a adding up of choices, because I was still doing other things that might not have been that positive, and so this was just another one of those choices that you just kind of roll with. And that's why I tell people also that a little thing can add up to a big thing, because you typically don't go from stealing a pair of Nikes to robbing a bank. It leads up to stuff,
Hmm.
and there's other choices you've made in between there. And it's a build-up process. And that's what happened with me, man. But, you know, mentally, at that age, I think, 23, 24. You're still not really cognitively developed to really I feel as a male to make conscious decisions, you're still kind of acting off bravado, ego, and
Yeah,
other things.
I've
So,
been there.
sometimes it's hard for you to back down from something because you're like, oh man, this and that. And so that was a pivotal day, man. And like I said, my mom called me and that was a sign from God, man. But I wasn't in tune, man. And it wasn't until the bank robbery, which that whole day seemed like slow motion that morning. And when, we had the high speed chase, cops, helicopters, spike strip. I ran across the freeway, got arrested on the beach. And it wasn't until they put the handcuffs on me and I looked out into the ocean and the waves, and like it was like a spell had been broke. Like I snapped out, like, damn, man, why didn't I just, the cops are like high-fiving, they're like, damn, blah, blah, blah. And here I am, my dumbass, about to go lay down for some years. And for what? You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think like this, it's peanuts. I mean, robbing a bank, bro. There's so many other ways to get money. And I was just thinking, but that's after the fact. But yeah, that was a pivotal day, man. And like once I got the cuffs and I got to, kind of like letting it sink in, I immediately knew I had to like separate myself from the guys that got me here. And I'm not blaming them, because
You
those
make
guys
your
are
own
both dead.
choices. Yeah.
They're both dead. One
Oh
guy got
wow.
he did the least amount of time. He got out like in 5 years. He got lupus, died, and the other guy, he went crazy in prison, and he did 17 years or 15, I think 15 or 17 years, and he was living on Skid Row in L.A. and he got shot by the police.
Wow.
So both dudes are dead, man, and so it's like there was a bigger journey for me beyond that bank robbery, and I think that's why I'm still here.
Oh, 100%. There's always a purpose for your life. If you're still breathing and if you're on this side of the dirt, there's something for you to be doing. You might have to take some time to figure out what that something is, what that purpose is. But once you find it, you run with it and you find fulfillment in your life. So I'm glad that you're doing that. I'm on that road myself. So I'm trying to figure it out myself too. So just like everybody else. But be
Yeah.
that as it may, let's tie it back to the pictures on the wall, the imagination, the the drawing, with the video games, the skateboarding. You seem like a jack of all trades. You're not just some dude, some black dude that could be put in a box. Okay. So that's what I gather from you. And now you're in a box. So you're in this box. But let's talk about moment number two that I feel like defines you in my eyes. You weren't a regular inmate. In your series out here, you didn't just play dominoes. You didn't just lift weights. You didn't just hang out to hang out. Talk about your prison experience. Yeah, I don't remember you talking about fighting too much. You were just a different cat in there. Kind of talk about some of the things that you did in prison to pass your time that helped better you from when you left. Because you could have chosen to be one of those guys thrown in a hole or whatever they do with them, but you chose a different route in prison. Kind of talk to us about that route.
So once I got locked up and I was at the first holding facility, or second, I think, in San Bernardino, um, or actually at MDCLA, I started studying the law. I was like, let me figure some shit out. Let me try to see if I can get some of this time off, because I had no idea how much time I was looking at, what, breaking down the charges. So I started going to the law library.
And may I
And
ask you one thing on that? Let me ask you this. What percentage of inmates do that? Go to the law library. That doesn't sound like something that's normal.
so say in that facility on the floor I was on, there was probably, let's say, 100 some inmates, and maybe like there would be like 4 or 5 guys going to the law library. So on each floor, it might be altogether maybe eight, maybe 10 to 12 of us at the most. And that's what amazed me, man. See, the thing about jail, dudes are sitting around, like you said, playing dominoes, watching BET, arguing about sports, and they're just waiting. Nobody's questioning how, whether the cops did it procedurally right, what the law means, whether rights violated. It's like everybody's just sitting there like, you were this hardcore gangster or drug, whatever the case, but you get to jail. You're just obedient Sam. You do what you're told. You follow. You don't even question anything, and that's what blew me away, man. It's like, wow, you mean to tell me, dude, you're looking at 30 years? You're not going down to the law library?
To try
Oh man,
something,
I
to try,
try
to do
something,
something.
man.
Yeah.
You're not filing anything, and so I started studying, man, and I ran across a guy, and he had a case similar to mine, and he was able to get some time off of his sentence, and it inspired me. So I used what he used, and this is when I knew that the game is not favorable to people in jail, and you got to really apply yourself and realize, just like in everything else in the world, there's two sides to everything. Well, the case that he had that I used, it said non-published, right? So when I showed that to my public pretender, she was like, "Where'd you get that from?" I said, "Well, there's another guy, and he was coming from court, and he let me look at his paperwork, and I copied it, and I said, it was able to get 2 years off." She's like, "Well, you did it. Well, I don't know why you're trying to fight this." I'm like, "What do you? Wait a minute. Why am I not fight? Why am I fighting? You're like, you're not gonna be that old when you get out." And I'm saying, "Dan, this is a cold game, man. They want you just to take this and keep going. So um after that, it kind of like it sent me in a whole nother direction. I started studying a bunch of stuff. I ended up getting transferred because I don't know if they said these guys researching, but anyways, I used that to get time off my sentence. And then after I got sentenced, when I got to the USP Law Park in 2000, I started going to law library, meeting other guys in there, some Muslim brothers, some brothers from the East Coast, some dudes from LA that were studying. One of my mentors there, he was really big into law. He broke down the Black's Law Dictionary to me, the Bill of Rights, the congressional acts, the U.S. Attorney's Manual. He gave me all this stuff, and when I started reading this stuff, bro, I felt like an idiot. I felt like I got played. Like I bought into this whole bullshit gangster street dude shit, man. I said, man, these lawyers are destroying these dudes. These U.S. attorneys. It would be like me and you going to the elementary school and playing kickball, and every time we kick the ball, it's just going over the fence. That's how one-sided the justice system is with education. Most guys don't have no GED, hardly any college education. They're so codependent on this person explaining stuff to them, they don't even know what it means, and then they're just going along with what's being told to them.
Yeah.
So I'm in there studying, doing my thing, and it's crazy, man, because like some dudes in there that look like me are actually like mad dogging or confrontational because I'm fighting my case. I
Mm-hmm.
had a guy actually want to he actually was mad. He was asking me, why am I going to the law library? And this guy just walks the yard and he's carrying knives and shit. He's with the bullshit. But he's like, hey man, why are you always going to the law library? I said, I'm studying. And he's like, what are you studying, man? I'm studying the law. I said, man, what you in here for? I said, I'm in for bank robbery. He said, man, did you have a gun? I said, yeah. He said, oh man, did you get caught? Did you do it? I'm like, yeah. He says, man, do your time. I said, man, you do your time. And me and the dude squared off. And I'm looking like this is a dude, a cold animal. And that's why prisons are for. Some of these dudes is animals, bro. And I'm not trying to say I'm better, but I'm saying I'm trying to better myself. But these dudes, this is like you go in there and it's almost like they become normal. That becomes their normal habitat. And so when these guys get out, they're back with the shit. I mean, that's like to them almost like a rite of passage. And some people never wake up, man. But yeah, my journey was studying the law. I mean, I ended up helping a lot of guys file motions, file habeas corpuses. I helped guys with their some guys with their child support, guys with their divorce papers, helping guys get priors. I learned a lot, man. And eventually I had my own crew and we were helping people file motions in court. But that's what I spent majority of my time doing. I never really played dominoes. I didn't play any prison sports. I wasn't involved in any gambling. I didn't mess around, man. I just studied, and my whole goal was to try to get out early. But in the process, I learned a lot about the law.
Okay, so what I gather from what you said is you had to go sit down. Sometimes I've had to go sit down too, not to that extent. A lot of people have to go sit down. Like sometimes messages have to be hammered in your head in the hardest ways. You know what I mean? I always tell, I'm a teacher, and I tell my kids all the time, you rather me give you this reprimand than have to figure it out with steel cuffs around your wrist. You know what I mean? So you had to sit down, but you use that time wisely. You educated yourself. You bettered yourself. Do you think you would have done that stuff had you had ever not been locked up?
I think had I maybe had the exposure to the right people, because my mind had to flip to go to a different direction. So, when I was in, besides studying in prison, I also was like, okay, when I get out, this is what kind of people I want to be around. I would look for like, okay, I want to hang out at these restaurants. I want to go and get into this, this type of environment. I really paid attention more because on the streets, I was lost, man. I mean, I was free, but I didn't have no direction. I was like just kind of in LA doing my thing, not really focused on anything particular. And I didn't have anybody kind of like really putting me under their wing. And a mentor, if you don't have a coach, a mentor is the best thing you can have besides a dad that's like giving you life lessons. A lot of people think they're doing something because they have kids. Bro, what are you giving them? Your kid is just, oh, he graduated. So what? He should graduate. He should have a roof on his head, food in the stomach, clothes on. What are you giving them to compete? And once I start, you start looking at competing and you start thinking about, okay, these kids that are going to these private magnet schools or kids coming from Ivy League, the connections. And that's what I've seen in prison, the connections. I'm talking to a dude, he's tied into one of the heads of one of the mafia crime families. He's talking to me and I'm seeing this dude, he's on some other shit. I'm talking to this dude, he was making 100,000 a week. I'm talking to this dude, and you're like, damn, man. On the street, I didn't know, I wasn't around people like balling like this, and I wasn't really looking for it, and I wasn't paying attention. And if it was going on, it was invisible. So, going to prison and hearing about like, real estate, business, car sales, movie production, it just opened my mind up. And so I took those things and ran with them. And those are the things that I applied when I got out and started laying down a foundation so I could put myself around people who think big, because some people, you might think that your friends that they don't have that same mentality, man, and those people are dangerous to you. People see you trying to, they think, oh man, Coach Mike, you thinking you this and that, man. Them people will take you down, man.
Yeah, it's so funny how you say that when it comes down to your environment, your surroundings. You kind of learn the greatest lessons from the weirdest places. Like who'd have known that you would have learned what you learned being locked up behind bars? And let's say you stayed free the entire time. You never would have got put on any of that game. And it's funny, I got a book recommendation if you ever want to sit down and read it. If you haven't, I think it's a good read for what we just talked about. It's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called The Story of Success, and it talks about outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. It just talks about how, not everybody starts off in the same at the same starting line as everybody else. You know what I mean? Some people are privy to certain information. Certain people are connected to different people. Certain people are just born at the right time. Right now, being born in this age of the internet, the age of social media, we can capitalize on that and make a living on it in some cases. Whereas some people from the 80s, they never got that chance. But I think you should read that book because it talks about how opportunity comes from the craziest of places. And I have a little son, so it kind of what you said about the Ivy League schools and like just schooling in general, where you want to take your kid and things like that. That stuff matters. You have to give your kid opportunities, and that's your job as a father, especially to a little boy. Give your kid that opportunity, lace them up on game. I really respect what you just said about that. But all right, so you're not a regular inmate. Okay, you made your choice. I'm about to go in here. I'm getting out. I'm trying to figure something out. Something's got to crack. So you got out. Now I know felons. The life is not easy after. It's not set up for you to succeed. I know one guy. It's hard for him to get an apartment, job, all kinds of things. You have choices now. What what was your choice of what to do next?
Well, before I got out, I wrote like 3 books, and I had a came up with a treatment for a show called Fresh Out. And so I had met some guys in prison that were writing movie scripts, that were writing books. And so that inspired me to get out and use my life experience to monetize it, to turn it into something positive, a negative to a positive. So when I got out, I had already had like, I think I ordered like 500 books, 400 or 500 books. I had them sent to a homeboy's house that I did time with. And when I got out, I got the books from him, and I was going around to bookstores trying to get my book in these stores. So I
Okay.
was hustling.
Hustling.
I was already doing that. And then because I was in decent shape and I knew how to work out, I would go to the gym and I see people working out. And if I see somebody with bad form or look like they were kind of like open to criticism, but in a positive way, I would hit them up and they're like, "Are you a trainer?" I look around, I'm like, "Nah, but here's my card." I had a little card I
There you
made up.
go.
And so I was hustling. And, I was so happy to be out, so grateful that I was just on a mission, man. And I was just networking, one of the dudes I did time with, he helped me out and he sent me some money to get a car. And, this is my thinking at the time. It's like, man, I'm not going to drive nothing less than a Benz. So I went and bought an old beat up Benz, man. That thing was smoking, but it was, old 70, 78 or 80 Benz. And it was, SEL. And I'm driving that, I went and got it and I'm driving it. And then during the day when I can't drive it because I'm in the halfway house, I'm renting it out to the other dude so he can drive it and get around. So I'm making a little hustle by renting out the car until it blew up. And
Blew up.
I'm doing all these little hustles, man. But I ran into a guy I grew up with, and he hooked me up a fake job, and I was just able to kind of navigate my way into opportunities between selling my book, personal training people. Um, I would even sell people supplements. I would find in the back of the book these little supplements, and then I would turn around and sell them to other people double for what I paid for them. Like, hey man, this stuff right here have you on swole. So I'm talking using my mouthpiece, and then in between that, I'm also before I got out, I bought a little handy cam. So I bought a handy cam, and I'm filming myself. And I don't know anything really about editing, but I'm gonna use that to create a sizzle reel to sell my show fresh out. So I
There you
had this
go.
plan where I'm gonna produce my own show. I'm gonna blow up. I'm gonna have a show kind of like Cops, blah blah blah. And so that was my plan, man. But I'm the type of guy all or nothing. I don't like backup plans. I never, I never filled out a job application. When
Okay.
I got out, I never filled out. I mean, I seen guys in the halfway house like really struggling, and you could see it like they were just beat down, like life had just like, after doing 20 years or 15 years, if a lot of those guys didn't have girlfriends or baby mamas or family, they were pretty much beat down. And for me, I had no family in LA, but I had built up relationships. So I was able to kind of find people that wanted to help me out. And I didn't even see my family for probably about a year after I got out because they were kind of all jaded by me having done all that time. But yeah, man, my plan was it was an all or nothing, man, to come up with a show. I think this was, it was I didn't get it on YouTube for a little while, but I was trying to pitch the show. I was doing my training. I was trying to come up with a clothing line. I was just hustling, man, just trying to sell my book,
Yeah.
and that was my plan.
No, no doubt, man. Hey, look, man, you got to do what you got to do out here. So I appreciate that because, and I want people hearing this to kind of see, sometimes you got to get up and get out. You got to put yourself out there. It's not enough time to sit there and wallow out and oh boo, what do you say? The woe is me, yada yada yada.
Yep.
I got to find
Yep.
something, and I got to make something happen. That's what you were doing. So that leads me to moment 4, your social media start. So you said you wanted to you want to edit, you want to make your fresh out series. It was a idea in your mind that you were gonna put your whole into, your all into. All right. So go back to that first show. 0 followers, 0 subscribers, no clout, no comments. You just threw it out there. What made you do it, and how did you feel as you jumped off that proverbial cliff?
My level of confidence was pretty high, so I didn't really second guess myself. But I had met a guy at the gym, and we're still friends. He's still my partner in Fresh Out. And I told him, I said, man, I got an idea for a show. And I think I know somebody that could be our first person we interview, which was Cali Muscle. So I told him, and then my neighbor, he was a film guy. He's a film. I always see him on camera. I was like, hey man, you film? He's like, yeah. I said, well, I want to shoot this show. Can you shoot it? Blah 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 blah. So we came up with an intro. We decided to film Cali, and we didn't know what we were doing. My buddy, he knows how to do a website, so he did a website, and we created the channel, put up the website because we were going to sell little T-shirts. He came up with a logo, and we put it up, and it just man, it hit. We were one of the first before everybody started talking about prison. We were probably one of the first three channels that had this genre. So we kind of blew up. And as we started finding people to interview, the channel just started organically to grow. We never paid for subscribers. We never paid for subs. It just kind of took on a life of its own. And in those stages when we were like probably at 100, 200,000 followers, people were hitting us up. We had people that wanted to we had an opportunity, like somebody wanted to work with us on the show. But the thing is, man, everybody's trying to take it. Everybody wants to steal the show. Like, we look at the deal and it's like, you sign this, but we own everything you do for the next 4 or 5 years. And you only, we'll pay you $1,500 a month or whatever, and $2,000 a month. And I'm like, dude, these are like shit deals. So, we kind of had to navigate through all that and just like be like, we're going to keep doing YouTube. But the thing about it, because we did have a prison genre, it made it harder for us to sell advertising because of the stigma with the genre being prison. So it's a little bit, that's been the hard part because of that particular genre is rooted in prison stuff, but we never glorify prison.